our math coach uses it. Mary Lopez does a lot with Geometry Sketchpad, and she was showing me something. She was in geometry, and they were doing the trig unit. She said, there's a Sketchpad thing that does, okay, so she showed it to me. And so I did it with them. And then the following year, I would do maybe 1 unit a quarter with them. So I did that with them. And then last year, I got to the point where I created my own lab for them to do on triangle centers and stuff. But I didn't use it that much because they didn't have their laptop all the time to make sure you had the cart or the lab. I was always, to get it for 3 classes, I couldn't do it. So this year I was like, oh, they have laptops all the time. I can do Sketchpad whenever I want. This year I was going to make sure I just integrated it into everything, when I wanted to. I could demo-proof things instead of doing it on paper. One day I thought, I can do chapter 3. It's all transformations. I don't like to draw those on paper. Why should anyone have to do a rotation on paper anymore? It's all on the computer. And they can do so much more. I see a lot more interest in it. I mean, I've never had a class forget to leave, which is what that one class did one day when they were working on their project. And I said, 3 minutes, save everything. And the next thing I know, the bell rings, and 20 kids, not one of them moved. They were still all at their laptop. And I waited. I said, you guys, that was the bell. The bell to leave? Oh. And then they got up and left. But I've never had a class do that, miss leaving class. That level of interest I don't see. And they start to pay more attention to definitions because Sketchpad is just tied to that. If you don't understand the concept, the geometry concept, or the geometry definition, it's not going to do what you want it to. I would say that Geometry Sketchpad enhances the learning of geometry. It just reinforces the concepts, and it gives me a different way to teach it. I'm always looking at different ways to do things because you got to try to reach all these different kids, and one way doesn't work. Did you prove that this was bisected? This is congruent to that? So it just is another way to get them to understand something. And it works so much better that we have the one-to-one program because they have their computers every day, and I don't have to fight language arts for the lab. They always work in groups, and they're always talking with each other, and I think the one-to-one is just taking it a step further, that they're very confident in telling each other things. And with computers, even more so.
But since ADC says it's 90, that means that it has to be perpendicular bisector to BC.
Well, then put it down there.
All right, I will put it down
I watched the first Sketchpad lesson last year I did with a class, and you'll hear, I can't make this show up. And from the other side of the room, you hear, do this. I mean, it's like it's one big group. They share really easily with computers. On Monday, we introduced the isosceles triangle theorems. They have been learning about hypothesis and conclusions. And so the hypothesis was if you have an isosceles triangle and all we had was the definition that the sides were congruent, what else is true? And then today's activity with Sketchpad was to show another way to prove it. And it was one of the things that I sit down with Sketchpad and I do it ahead of time. I'm going to make sure that it works. And I'm walking around the room, I'm like, I never thought of doing it as a circle. And so then to demonstrate it, have the kid tell me what they did, and the rest of the class go, oh, that's easy. Where that was at the point that I realized a lot of them hadn't done it that way. They had done it the other way. And so it was just, I'm constantly learning from them. And especially with the technology, you can learn a lot from them. But you have to create that environment where they feel comfortable. And then it doesn't bother me that they find something out that I hadn't thought of. And so it's a good learning experience for them and for me.